ตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ So we've been practicing together for many months now through the COVID-19 lockdown. The seasons change, different aspects of our life may have changed. We're all older now. Physically we've grown and moved on a little bit from when the COVID virus first led to us doing these Zoom sessions. And our life situation may have changed, our work, our family, different things have changed through many weeks and months of practicing during lockdown. But hopefully you can appreciate how if you have a regular Dhamma practice, particularly if you have a time once or even twice a day where you take that time to practice meditation, maybe do some chanting, listen to Dhamma, and you do that pretty much every day, regularly, through the weeks, through the months. You might appreciate that it gives you a certain anchor or solidity in your mind. It grounds you, even though the world itself is always changing. Physically we're changing, and the society, the economy, the world around us is changing all the time. But it gives you some sense of stability or being grounded if you have that regular practice. And you might also find that if it's more or less the same time every day, when it gets to that time during the day to practice, your mind, through very skillful, good conditioning that you've developed over time, your mind might quite naturally feel ready to settle down, focus on the breath or any other meditation object you use, let go of the day's worries, plans, different sources of anxiety and agitation, and come to the breath and to maintain mindfulness quite easily because of that regular practice. Even though each breath is a new breath, each day is a new day, there's that sense of continuity of practice, coming back to the present moment, meeting it with mindfulness, reflecting on the teachings, using them to deal with perhaps particular stress or suffering that's coming up in your mind, reflecting on the teachings, bringing insight and wisdom. That has a cumulative effect. We grow in the Dhamma through that regular practice, and we feel like we have something that we can keep coming back to every time we establish mindfulness. Your mind is going back to that wholesome space, and that wholesome space in the mind grows. It becomes more meaningful to us, more valuable, more helpful, more beneficial. And we can all benefit from doing certain activities regularly, and our own body, our brain, and then our mind benefits from regular practice. It gets easier, it gets more used to it. If you hear the neuroscientists talking about it, they say the neural channels or pathways in your brain are being established by regular practice of mindfulness, regular reflection on the Dhamma. So it will get easier. The more we practice, the more we remember the words and the teachings the Buddha gave, the easier it is for our minds to turn to the Dhamma when we are stressed or confused or doubtful, worried. So regular practice is the best way to improve your practice. We all want quick results, we all want good results, we all want to be enlightened from our practice. But there's no way around it. We have to practice regularly. But you will see the benefits, especially over a period of time like this. A number of months where you've practiced consistently, you should be able to look back and say, oh, before I did this regular practice, it was much harder for me to sit still and meditate for a period of time, for example. But now I can. And that's one thing that grows, is your determination, your patient effort, and being able to discipline your mind and your body to accomplish different tasks you set for yourself in your practice. So many people find when they first learn to meditate, they can only sit still for a short period of time because the body just seems so full of pain and discomfort, and the mind seems to be all over the place, running here and there after every thought, every sound, everything we see, hear, taste, touch, drags our mind out towards that sense contact. So we don't seem very peaceful when we begin. But as you keep practicing, you find you do become more settled. You are able to let go of the distractions better. You become more patient with yourself. It's a bit like the cows here. We live in the countryside, and sometimes the farmers, they have cows, and then the cows have their babies, the calves. When the calves have been around for a few weeks, then they separate them from the parents. And if you are there when they separate, the calves, baby cows, they hate it. They run around mooing and making a big noise, and the mum and dad are not that happy, or the mums are not that happy. And that noise goes on all night. All night long, the young cows wander around the field. They're now separate from their mothers, and they're just mooing and making a fuss. Sometimes they even break the fence down to try and get back to their mother because they're so upset. It always reminds me of the human mind when we begin to train it in mindfulness and the Buddhist path. It doesn't want to settle down. It wants to make a noise. It can't accept just being still, being quiet. And this is the power of our karma, our previous karma that we've made through our lives. We've built up all kinds of attachments to people, places, experiences. We've got used to always seeking out sense pleasures, things we want to see, hear, taste, touch, smell, or even just think about, imagine, fantasize. We've got used to that sense pleasure and seeking sense pleasure. We've got used to always pushing away unpleasant things. So any pain in the body, we quickly try to get rid of it, squash it, suppress it, or distract ourselves from it. Unpleasant people we try to avoid, unpleasant situations we try to avoid. This is our karma. Through our life, we've got used to that habit of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. And those habits have become very strong. So when we come to sit down and meditate, and they show themselves, the mind, as soon as a desire comes up, you're trying to watch your breath, follow the in-breath, the out-breath, establish mindfulness, clear comprehension, but then a desire comes up. And because of karma, and particularly habitual karma, often it's a desire we've given into before. We're used to following desires. Desire to get things, want things, have things, and the desire to get rid of things. This is what the Buddha called craving, or Dhamma. When it comes up, we tend to just follow it because we've done that so many times before. We're used to following craving. What we want, what we like, we go for. We try to get it, do it, follow it. What we don't like, we just try to get rid of it, get away from it. And that is what happens when you start meditating. As soon as there's an itch, you want to scratch. As soon as there's a little bit of pain, you want to get up, move away. As soon as your mind is a little bit restless or bored or thinking about something you don't really like, you want to get away from that way of thinking. So you try to change your thought, or you may even just turn on yourself in your meditation and say, this is no good, meditation is making me unhappy, and so on. So what you find is if you do practice regularly, this ability, the strength of mind improves, and it helps us to see craving, as it is, which is different kinds of desire, sensual desire, desire to become, desire to get rid of. You can see craving, as it's arising the more you practice, because you become clearer in your own mind. And hopefully what you find is your mind starts to incline more towards peace rather than the discontent, the agitation of craving, because that's all it stirs up, is more discontent, more craving, more craving. You know, the Buddha compared craving to an endless river. Nati danha samanati. There's no river as long as the river of craving. So as long as you keep following it and falling into it, or falling under its power, it never ends, never stops. So it's constantly agitating the mind. I've got to have this, I've got to get that, I want to get away from this because I don't like it. When we're meditating, we start to see that very clearly, but as soon as you become mindful, bring up the patience, bring up the effort, you have the chance to recognize craving for what it is. It's just craving is the source of suffering in our mind. And the Buddha said we have to let it go. So instead of following the old karma, the old habits, and just following craving all the time, following every desire, reacting with liking and disliking, as we meditate, our understanding improves, where we can see craving as the cause of suffering, and it's the craving that we have to let go of to become peaceful. In the old days, when we weren't very mindful, to become peaceful, we thought we had to actually follow the craving and try and get what we want or get rid of what we don't like to be peaceful. And so if you were starting your meditation and you had pain, you might straight away stop and say, oh, I can't meditate, I've got pain in my knee. Or you have some desire to eat or talk to somebody. In the old days, you would just follow that desire. So straight away you lose your mindfulness and maybe give up your meditation. But if you've been practicing regularly for a while, your endurance, your patience, your strength of mindfulness is improved. It gives you that chance to just note craving and to catch it before you follow it and indulge it, and know it for what it is. Craving. I've seen this before. I don't have to follow it. So the desires may still arise, but now you're looking at them differently. You're looking at them from a place of wisdom and understanding more and more. Of course, there are always different types of craving which still catch us out, annoy us because we gave in to that desire. We have to accept that. We're not yet perfect. But as we're practicing, hopefully you can experience sometimes where you are mindful enough, clear enough to recognize craving arising. And this insight, seeing craving as the cause of suffering, and then letting it go, not getting involved with it, not following it, not grasping onto it, that insight is exactly the same as all the enlightened teachers have had since the Buddha up to the present day. No different. Because it's one of those insights that human beings can have. And the Buddha said actually being born as a human being is of great benefit, because the human realm is a perfect laboratory for understanding craving as the cause of suffering and then abandoning it. Because we have the chance to see craving every day in ordinary situations. Craving for the objects of our senses, things we like. Craving to become all our aspirations, expectations, what we want to be, what we think we should be, how we think our life should be. We're seeing this coming up in the mind all the time. And then craving not to become, craving to get rid of experiences and situations we don't like, don't want. The human realm is bringing us that all the time. And for one who is practicing, they're learning from those experiences to recognize craving for what it is. It's the cause of suffering. And really it's in our own best interest to abandon it when we've seen it. In the old days, before we practiced, or before we were very aware, we didn't think like that. In the old days, we'd think craving, follow it and I'll be happy. If I get what I want, I'll be happy. If I get rid of the thing I don't like, I'll be happy. And we brought that attitude into our meditation. So when I first began meditating, every itch or sensation in the body was something I had to react to. So you feel an itch and you think, I've got to scratch it. You have a little bit of pain or sensation in your leg, you've got to move it. You feel a bit cold, so you've got to find more clothes or change the temperature in the room somehow. You feel too hot, you've got to take something off, put a fan on. I noticed when I began meditating, every bit of craving I had to act on. But by practicing regularly and watching and observing, I started to see if you follow craving all the time, you're really actually getting quite tired. It's like a slave master who keeps telling you, go here, go there, do this, do that. To be happy, you have to get this. To be happy, you have to get rid of that. It's like this nagging voice always on in the back of your head and never giving you any peace, always bringing you just a sense of discontent, dissatisfaction. Nothing is right, nothing is good. And as soon as I started to become more mindful in meditation, I realized this is actually the source of the suffering. Not the pain or the things of the world, but just that craving that links your mind to the experiences of the world that you have through your senses. The way you react, the way your attitudes come up, the way you think and look at things, that's actually the source of suffering more than the experiences themselves. And you learn that because as you meditate, you realize, if you've decided today I'm going to set aside time to listen to Dhamma or meditate for 30 minutes or 1 hour, you've already made that decision. So you've probably cleared away all other engagements and appointments and activities, unless it's an emergency. There's nothing else you have to do. So you've already done the groundwork. So once you're meditating, any desire that comes up, it's not that important. If any thought that comes up, say you have the thought, I want to eat. Well, you've either eaten already or you've already made your plan, I'll eat at a certain time later today. During the meditation period, you don't need to eat. So, for example, when the desire for food arises, you just watch it. And you're not going to die. Just by not eating for half an hour, you're not going to die. Letting go of the various desires for food, thinking about kinds of food, what you like, etc. You are not going to die, you're not going to suffer, you're not going to miss out simply by setting aside those desires during your meditation. So most people find they can, at least sometimes. Desires for all kinds of things come up. Sense objects, desires for things we want to have, we can afford to just let them go because we've already allowed ourselves this time to practice letting go. So craving is already put into perspective. Of course, when you meditate, there's many kinds of craving that are very kind of annoying and stubborn and keep coming back, and you let it go once and it'll come back again. So you have to be very patient with that. But what's important is the attitude and the insight, seeing this craving is a cause of suffering. It's something that I should let go of. It can be let go of. I'll put effort into letting it go. Even if it does re-emerge, it comes back. I know how to treat it. I know what I have to do with it. It's very important to get this understanding right in the beginning of your meditation, that craving in all its forms is to be abandoned because it's the cause of suffering. And most people find that's quite reassuring because, yeah, of course, craving comes up often, sometimes in very powerful emotional waves, sometimes in just niggling small ways. But if you have the right attitude and that you're training yourself to recognize craving for what it is, then you feel at ease because you know what it is, you know what you have to do, even though the task may seem quite a big task and quite daunting. It's like, oh, when am I going to finally drop this craving? But at least you know what you have to do, how you have to practice. You have the right understanding, the right attitude. That's a great step forward. And that only improves from not just right understanding, but into the actual right practice of learning to let go of craving. And I'm sure many of you participating today and on other of our sessions will have already passed through all kinds of cravings and recognize already that you can let them go. Whether it's just the desire to scratch an itch that you've ignored and you didn't scratch, you didn't move, you just ignored it until the itch went away, or the desire to go and get a snack or have a drink when you don't really need one, or the desire to think about certain things. Another big form of craving that comes up that as soon as we sit down to meditate is often stimulated is various kinds of aversion, or craving not to become, or craving to get rid of certain things. Straight away it may come up in your mind. As you're sitting there, your mind goes to its base level, its kind of default mode. And so if your default mode from the past has been one of negativity, irritation, blaming, judging, anger, ill will in one way or another, well, often as you start to meditate, that's what pops into the mind because it's your base level, it's what you've been cultivating consciously and unconsciously maybe for many years. And your mind just slips down to that level quite quickly. But now as you're meditating, you see it. You see that kind of negativity as it is, as craving. And this is what the Buddha is encouraging us to do, is to develop that clarity and insight to recognize craving as craving. What we normally do with negativity is get caught up into the details of the story. So it's that person, they did this and they shouldn't have done that, and why didn't they do this, and I really need to sort them out or get rid of them, or they're just causing problems in my life. You know, we go on, we feed the details by what we call unwise attention. When we're not mindful, when we're not recognizing craving as craving, then we get caught up into the story, the details, with unwise attention, and we feed it. So we're sitting there, meditating, remembering the Buddha, bringing up mindfulness, but that's only what we've told ourselves at the beginning of the meditation session. But actually we can spend 30 minutes thinking how much we hate somebody, or how much we want to get rid of them, get back at them, or hate ourselves if we're angry with ourselves, angry with something. We can spend 30 minutes doing that. And it can actually be quite energizing. You know, people find if they let go of their anger, often they have a lot of problems with sleepiness because they just become drowsy. But while they're angry, they're not sleepy, they're very stimulated. So it can be very stimulating and very easy for the details of that particular problem in your life that is causing this anger and ill will. They take over the mind, and we can think about it, remember every detail. You know, when you ask people, what did the monk teach today in the Dhamma talk? You know, the monks give you a nice Dhamma talk with a lot of good information and encouragement, and people say, I don't know, I can't remember, it's all gone from my mind. But then you say, well, in your meditation, what were you thinking? You say, oh, today I had so much anger. You say, well, what are you angry about? And they say, oh, I was angry about this person because they did this and they said that, and they've got all the details there in their mind. So clear, so familiar, because they've indulged it for so long, so many times. And yet the good stuff, the Dhamma that they heard, didn't register maybe. That's a very common thing when the mind is exposed to good things, mindfulness of breathing, listening to the Dhamma, spreading thoughts of loving kindness. It kind of disappears very quickly. But when we're exposed to what we don't like and it stirs up anger, ill will, we remember every last detail of what's been said and done and who and where and when. And we become like a kind of a detective or a lawyer or something, and we've got our case, why we should be angry and what they did and how they should be punished. Strange that, isn't it? With the details of unwholesome Dhammas, we store them, we remember them. With the wholesome Dhammas, it's harder. Why is that? Oh, it's because of karma. We've been used to holding on to ill will in the past, so we're good at it. We've been not so used to holding on to the Dhamma and reflecting on that, so we're not so good at it. And this is why we practice. It's the same with greed, isn't it? The things you're greedy for, you remember every detail, every beautiful detail, every lustful detail, every detail of the thing you like. You've got it there in your mind. You can fantasize about it all day. So people do. They spend their meditation time, instead of establishing mindfulness and letting go of craving and seeing craving and letting it go, they're with their desire, their greed, their desire for things, their lust, and they can spend 30 minutes imagining all the pleasures of the world, keeping themselves quite occupied and interesting. All the details are there. Just the same with anger. It can be very stimulating. Strong greed can keep you up. So you hear people say, oh, I can meditate for many hours when I've got greed because I'm so stimulated, I just keep going and going, thinking about the thing I'm greedy for. Or the same with anger. Like monks say sometimes when we do our all-night meditations, they say, oh, I can sit up meditating all night long because I'm so angry, I'm so energized. But when the mind becomes calm and relaxed, it's with the breath, sleepiness. So this is part of the trick, or the allure of craving is, it stimulates us. And sometimes we like that stimulation, even for negative things, troublesome things, different forms of suffering. We find suffering can be stimulating up to a point. We're not yet seeing beyond it. This is where the Buddha said we have to develop right view, right understanding, and see beyond the initial stimulation of craving. Because craving, it's for, we feel when we're following craving, we're doing the right thing. We're going to get what we want, get rid of what we don't like so that we're free from it, get what we want so we've got it. It tricks us. And we have to look beyond it. So the Buddha gave lots of description of what craving is really like. So the easiest one is it's like fire. It burns you up because you're never at peace, you're never cool when craving is working. So you have to introduce this new way of looking at your own mental experience as you meditate and say, I better be suspicious or careful around this craving because it's leading on to fire. It's burning me up, it's leading to mental agitation, distress, suffering. I may not have seen that yet, but I better keep on my guard just in case it's true. We're here to practice and learn, so we shouldn't just believe everything the Buddha said. We have to put it into practice. But test yourself and ask yourself, is what the Buddha did, is what he said true or not? And the more you reflect on this, the more you probably come to agree. When I'm under the influence of greed, it's not pleasant. The mind is not content, it's not still, it's constantly being stimulated, agitated. And often greed itself leads on to more anger and negativity, because when you lose what you wanted or what you had, you get disappointed. And anger itself, ill will, leads to hatred, and it just reinforces itself, and we become more miserable, more unhappy. So sometimes we have to go through these details of the practice, remind ourselves why we practice, what the goal is, what the dangers are, what the obstacles are. So we have that bigger picture, the broader picture in mind as we confront craving during our meditation. Otherwise we tend to just get caught out over and over again, and it can be very frustrating, and we can feel disheartened after a while because craving is so so stubbornly there in our mind. We have to use a lot of wisdom and mindfulness to deal with it. But what you can also notice as you practice, say you're practicing meditation for a period of time and craving is coming up, you're being either caught into desire for things or to get rid of things. Over time, you'll also notice, though, there are periods when your mind is not caught into craving, when it feels more normal, more at ease. And that's also something to be very mindful of and to recognize and value. The time when you're not angry, the time when you have no greed or desire for anything in your mind, the time when the mind feels quite normal, calm, at ease. If you recognize that more and more, then your mind will incline towards that mental state where you're not reacting with desire or aversion, you're more calm, just aware of things and feeling more normal. Because it's such a subtle experience, we miss it all the time. Through your day, there'll be times when your mind feels quite normal and at ease, but you might miss it because we tend to go for the more stimulating things, which tend to be craving. So we go for excitement. We like excitement, things that make us feel really high, happy, excited. Or we tend to really focus on what makes us feel bad, unhappy, angry. Those extremes are what tend to pull our mind all the time. Feeling just normal doesn't pull the mind so easily. So you have to learn to cultivate an appreciation for the mind that is normal. Even the word sometimes is off-putting. Normal. It doesn't sound very creative or exciting, interesting, stimulating. As a word, normal can even almost bring up more aversion. But for one meditating, it's like an acquired taste. The taste, the experience of the mind that is just normal. So they say when you're practicing the Buddhist path, we're also practicing the 5 precepts, or trying to use them as guidelines for our behavior, speech and actions. That also is bringing your mind to a state of normality, where you're not thinking to hurt or harm others through your speech or actions. You have just a normal feeling in your mind. You have a sense of respect for other people, their property. You're feeling clear-headed. You're not intoxicated with anything. The precepts and practicing with them already brings up this sense of just feeling normal, at ease. And that, again, stimulates and supports the feeling of being at ease and feeling normal during meditation. And you notice the practice of precepts, when done consciously as a practice of mindfulness through the day, being mindful of speech and actions, letting go of more unskillful intentions, it brings the mind to be able to focus on itself much more skillfully, and we can do it better. We can meditate better when we've been practicing the precepts mindfully, consciously through our day. Because already when you practice the precepts, not only does it bring you to experience a state of normality, just feeling normal, at ease, but also it requires us to pay attention to our intentions, our speech, our actions. And that's the foundation for deepening our meditation, both on the level of calm and insight. So the overall result of keeping the precepts, developing mindfulness, developing insight into craving and letting it go is the mind gets to more and more experience a state of normality. You could say when we're angry, we're abnormal. The mind is abnormal. When we're caught into greed, it's abnormal. And this is why greed and anger cause suffering. Because what's abnormal, you're not at ease, your mind is not still, it's not peaceful, it's not normal when it's abnormal. So that's another clue, is how to proceed in your practice. Or you notice when you are becoming discontent, stirred up, there must be some craving lying behind that. And it can be in the most, a normal situation on the outside, but our mind maybe on the inside is not normal. So it could be just something like you're driving a car, an activity like you do every day, maybe many times a day, many days a week, you drive a car. But observe as you're driving from time to time and from day to day, your mood won't be the same each time, will it? If you're in a rush, maybe you've got a lot of things to do and you've put pressure on yourself to get a lot of things done, you could say that's a form of craving. I've got to do this, get that, get that, get that. So you put pressure on yourself time-wise, and then you're driving, so maybe that's reflected in your driving, and you feel tense in your body, and you're easily irritated whenever the traffic lights are red or there's traffic in the street slowing you down. The craving comes up. So it's a normal situation, driving a car, but an abnormal state of mind, you're getting caught into irritation or frustration because of your desire to get things done. Or it could be anything else, just putting your clothes on. Say in the morning you get up late, you're feeling tired, so you get up late and then you're going to be late for work. So you put your clothes on fast, and then you whatever it is, you zip something up and make a mistake, or you're putting your buttons in wrong, or you pick the wrong piece of clothing up too fast, try and put it on, maybe even tear something or break something, or say you're going out to work and you're late, so you try and rush your breakfast. Maybe you have a cup of coffee and it's too hot, so you want your coffee but you've got no time, so you drink it down and scald your mouth. Or throwing the food inside too quick so you don't feel comfortable in your stomach and it's stuck in your windpipe, and all kinds of things happen in a very normal situation, but your mind is not normal because of some form of craving. Or like when somebody criticizes you, say you're at work and you're in a normal situation, you've done a task, done some activity, and then there's feedback from your manager or your colleague or somebody, a customer, and maybe it's negative feedback. Suddenly your craving is stimulated. So it's a normal situation, you're normally there at work doing something, but then you've got this abnormal state of mind that's being stimulated by some criticism. So you have maybe aversion or fear even, or anxiety. That's how it happens, isn't it? Normality is on two levels. It's on the outside, the normal situations we're in, often very regular normal situations. But then on the inside, and often the mind is not normal when we fall under the sway of craving. So it's in our own interest to learn to be more mindful and recognize craving so that we can deal with it effectively. So if, say, in the situation where somebody is criticizing you, giving you negative feedback, it's always the place to practice is start with mindfulness. Bring up the mindfulness at that moment. So it's always good to pause, before you say something or do something, just pause to assess, to become mindful what's going on here. What are they saying? What are the words? What are the meaning? Is it true? Maybe it's true, and you have to honestly accept what they're saying is true. Be observant of craving arising. I don't like them saying this, but at the same time you have the Dhamma because you are being mindful and reflecting it's true. So you allow the cravings to subside by bringing up the awareness of truth in that situation. It may take time, craving, if it's strong, can have an unpleasant feeling, a negative train of thought. But if you've established mindfulness, that's the way to abandon craving at that time, and gradually it will subside if you're mindful. If you're not mindful, well, you tend to just react with your sense of self, your aversion. They've criticized me, I don't like it, I don't want it. So maybe we say something back in defense, or we argue, or we attack them. Sometimes attack is the best form of defense. So, they criticize you, so you criticize them back. Or whatever it may be, we give in to the craving, it only makes things worse. Probably damages the relationship with that person, damages our own mind, we feel more hurt, more upset, and the whole process lingers on longer and maybe affects us for many hours or even days. So it's in our own interest to practice mindfulness and become more aware of craving. And we do the intense practice when we're meditating, really learning to observe our mind, recognize craving, see what it does, see how we can let go of it. But then also carrying on into the field, into the battlefield of work, family, daily life, but using exactly the same understanding and wisdom that we're learning from our meditation, putting it into effect, applying it in daily life, driving a car, going to work, eating our food, and observing how craving is often coming up and prompting certain feelings in the body. With strong greed, you feel one way. Like monks know this, like monks, we only eat one meal a day, so you often see craving coming up around food time because you've only got one meal a day, and it's, you eat for maybe 20 minutes, so all your food pleasure is packed into 20 minutes. So not so much senior monks, they've learned how to manage their craving and let go of it, but maybe new monks, sometimes you see them, they're facing all this food, and people are very generous, very kind. They often bring very nice food to the monastery. And they're looking at this food, there's the smell, the look. They haven't tasted it yet, but there's the anticipation. And some monks even get tears in their eyes. Just the craving swelling up, I've got to eat, and it looks so nice, I'm going to enjoy that. Can even bring tears in the eyes, saliva in the mouth. So craving also has its physical basis. In the same way, aversion. If you, again, with food, say in a monastery, when people are on retreat, you see this sometimes. When we have a retreat, you might have 100 people. The food tables are there. They've provided enough food for everyone, but as more people take their food, the amount is going down. Some people get agitated. Are they going to get enough food? Are they going to get what they want? And occasionally you see somebody making a grab for it. They were queuing up mindfully, but then the craving comes up and there's the last piece of cake or the last this or the last that. And so they break ranks and they run and pick up that piece of food, get it on their plate because of craving. So craving and aversion come up. If they don't get what they want, people can become annoyed. They didn't get the last piece or the piece of food they liked. Aversion comes up, or they get what they want. The desire comes up to rush for it. So craving will manifest both in the mind and then in our actions, our speech. It's conditioning us in multiple ways. And so strong craving comes up strongly. Strong feelings, can promote strong actions, both aversion and greed. This is where we're learning. And sometimes we have to learn through the suffering. Craving, we've given into some craving, but then we see the suffering that brought with it. So you only learn after the event, and then you're trying to establish awareness for the future. To prevent further craving overtaking me, I'm going to establish discipline, more mindfulness, certain rules for myself, be more careful with my behavior, and so on. This is the way we go. The learning comes first, seeing craving and then seeing its result. And then you're motivated to try to abandon craving before it even takes over your mind or conditions your actions. So in the example, going back to food again, you might learn to make rules for yourselves. I'm going to stay in the food line, whatever's there, whether it's there's enough for me, or some of the food I like is going to disappear before I get to it. I'll be with that. I'll accept that. Because there's always enough food, it's just you may not get exactly what you like. Monasteries are good places for practicing like that, whether you're on retreat or you're actually a monk or a nun. You learn a lot about yourself because you're seeing craving come up in these very ordinary situations. Like one time, many years ago in Thailand, we had the practice you couldn't choose your food for yourself. In the monastery, lots of nice food was offered every day, but other monks would get up and they'd receive the food and they'd just scoop it into everybody's bowl equally, going down the line. So if you have a line of monks, 10 monks, 15 monks, their bowls are put out, and the organizing monks would get up, they receive the food, and they come down the line and they just scoop one scoop into each bowl, and you get no choice. But occasionally there'd be a monk who didn't want something, or he wanted something more, and he'd just give in to his desires, and no, I don't want that, don't give me that, or I do want that, you missed me, you didn't give me that. Very occasionally you'd see that reaction, and you see, craving is like that. Prompts us to break ranks or say something when we were practicing mindfulness and not speaking. It affects us like that. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it gets a bit challenging and difficult. The worst I ever saw was one monk, he had a bowl full of food after this exercise. Everybody is putting, the monks are coming down, spooning food into your bowl. You get no choice, so you just have to accept you get a bowl full of food that you didn't choose. You may not like everything in there. So when it came time to eat, he looked at his food, he didn't like it, so he just picked his bowl up and put it upside down, and all the food went on the floor. He was so upset and he stormed off. Everyone felt sorry for him, but you could see the power of craving. It can be like that sometimes. Not getting what we want, getting what we don't want. Could be at work, could be traveling, could be at home. This is an area to study to see how craving affects us, and it can affect us in very subtle ways. The tone of our voice reflects craving. Like one lady was saying, she knows how her husband is feeling towards her just by the tone of his voice. When he likes her, he speaks one way. When he doesn't like her, he speaks another. Same words, very ordinary, normal words, normal situation, but the tone of the voice changes based on the craving. This is the kind of insight, understanding the Buddha was helping us encouraging us to develop. Often it is very normal situations, but your underlying state of mind is reflecting the craving, and it will condition you, how you feel physically, what you say, what you think, what you do, and it's also affecting other people. In the end, other people have to sort out their craving. They have to be responsible for their practice. You can have compassion and support them, but they have to learn as well. And we have to do it for ourselves. And that's another thing. Often when we live in a group, in the family, the workplace, or a monastery, often we're looking at other people and we think we know all about them. Oh, they've got so much craving for food, or they sleep too much, or they talk too much, or they're greedy, or they're always getting irritated and annoyed. We know all about other people and their craving, even though we don't really know, but we think we know, we assume we know. And then ourselves, we miss it all. We make judgments of others, we talk about others as though we know everything they've thought and said and done. But ourselves, we miss it all. So we have to learn how to reverse that. Ajahn Chah used to say, when you live in a group, it could be a workplace or in a monastery, watch other people just 10% of the time. Watch yourself 90% of the time. Because craving comes up in your own mind, it affects your own behavior. You've got to take responsibility for it and sort it out and let it go. You need 90% of your energy for that. 10% you can watch others, you interact with others, you're aware of others, but you can't let go of their craving for them. They have to do that. So you only need 10% of the time to be aware, just enough to interact and successfully go about your business, say. But 90% of the time you've got to be watching yourself. That's where real effective practice comes from. And that's why we do meditation. We sit cross-legged, close our eyes. That we're getting quality time with ourselves when we're doing that. And that quality time can give rise to wisdom, insight, mindfulness, peace, and just seeing craving as craving rather than always following it, believing it, getting caught up in it. When you see craving as craving, you're seeing truth. The very truth the Buddha was pointing to. You're seeing craving as the source of suffering. What should happen to craving? It should be abandoned. And if you ever manage to abandon craving, and often we do it simply by watching it, not following it, letting it subside, it passes away, then we have the final insight. Craving has been abandoned. So when you look at the Buddha's explanation of the Four Noble Truths, this is what it involves. 3 phases, we say. There's the problem, craving. It's the cause of suffering. Craving is to be abandoned, the practice of abandoning it. Then the cessation of suffering, and craving has been abandoned. The job has been done. One has to do those 3 tasks, complete them. 3 duties have to be completed to follow the Buddhist path. And that's what we're learning in meditation. To recognize craving, abandon it, and recognize it has been abandoned. When you abandon craving, it brings you to this state of normality or normalcy. Sometimes we think meditation and Dhamma practice should bring us to some very exalted state. I should be blissed out, I should be head up in the stars, in the heaven realms, floating. We can't help but think like that, and we've heard maybe stories and teachings that seem to back that up. But actually, one who's seen the Dhamma, really their mind is just in a state of normality. They understand craving as craving, they know what it is, so they abandon it because they know if they hold on to it, they'll suffer. And if you know craving is the source of suffering, you don't want to suffer, you will abandon it. So they've done that, and their mind is normal. So they're always in this state of normality, even if the world is in chaos. There's pandemics, there's global economic crisis, there's wars and conflicts, all kinds of disturbances, or if one's physical health is in meltdown, all of that we would say is external. The important thing is keeping internally the right view, to recognize craving as the source of suffering and abandoning it. And one who does that, their mind is in a place of normality. The other day we were talking about how, like in northeast Thailand, you might say that in the last 100 years, it's the part of the world that has produced the most noble ones, enlightened beings, monks, nuns, men, women, who have realized the 4 stages of enlightenment: stream winner, once returner, non-returner, arahant. Northeast Thailand has produced many, many very good disciples of the Buddha. Luang Por Man and his disciples, Ajahn Chah was one of them. But at the same time, Northeast Thailand is bordered by Laos and Cambodia, and a little bit away is Vietnam, China as well. And through particularly, as we know, 50s, 60s, 70s, there were civil wars, communism came into those surrounding countries, and a lot of the monks had to disrobe, disappear. Buddhism struggled in those countries. Luckily, it didn't completely disappear, but it struggled. But in northeast Thailand, Buddhism managed to stay strong. The faith of the people was strong, the practice was strong, and some amazing teachers were produced right side by side with these civil wars that were going on. Like in Ubon, where Ajahn Chah used to live, Ubon had a big air base with Americans stationed there, and they go off and bomb other countries. Udon Thani, where Ajahn Mahabua lived, they had an air base, and the aeroplanes would fly over the monastery as they go off to bomb other countries. So strange truth is that on the one hand you've got people practicing and becoming fully enlightened arahants, and just a few miles away people unfortunately were dying in conflict, civil strife, side by side. So those enlightened ones, even though they were exposed and aware that there was armed conflict going on, it affected them directly, indirectly in some ways. But that didn't shake their practice and didn't shake their right view. They still had right view, clarity, they understood what craving is to be abandoned. So it just shows you, even when surrounded by a lot of chaos, disturbance, the unhappiness of human beings who are not yet peaceful, it's still possible for one to see the Dhamma. As long as one sees craving for what it is, craving is the cause of suffering, and one understands one has to abandon craving, well, one can practice in any place. And whether you're on the edge of a war zone or in a place of pandemic or economic collapse, one can still practice. The important thing is to establish this right view, the Four Noble Truths. Suffering, craving is the cause of suffering. Craving is to be abandoned through the practice, and the cessation of craving, the peace of the mind free from suffering, is to be experienced. So for today, maybe I'll say this much in the Dhamma talk, and the time we've got left can leave over for some questions perhaps.